Welcome to The Inner Edge, a podcast exploring the inner architecture founders. Here we go beyond tactics into the internal system behind external success. Decision making, resilience, clarity, and leadership from inside out. I'm Andy, and together with my amazing co host Valerie, we explore what it really takes to build great companies from a grounded and clear space. Valerie is an amazing human being, a good friend of mine, serial founder of 4 companies. She exited 3. The first company was founded in her early 20s while raising 3 amazing kids that I had the pleasure to get to know. And she's now one of the most renowned entrepreneurs and managers in Europe, managing the German office of a large early stage venture capital fund. She knows all the challenges as a founder, but also from the side of an investor in the investing game. So
Let me introduce you to my co host and dear friend, Andy Loy. Andy is an entrepreneur, investor, and AI leader who has spent the last decade building technology with global impact. He co founded Konox, one of Europe's leading AI companies, helped scale it international, and has been recognized by the World Economic Forum and MIT for his work in innovation. But what I value most about Andy is not just his track record, it's his deep commitment to conscious leadership and sustainable performance. I have personally learned a lot from my dear friend because he understands what it takes to build at scale without losing clarity, purpose, and most importantly, yourself in the process. So let's dive in.
amazing. Hello, Valerie. Great to see you again. I mean, today we have a very, very special topic, which is all about honesty, transparency, leadership, and I want to start with something personal from my side, where I don't know if you ever had that situation, but especially when I was raising my Series A, which was a very difficult process back at the time at Conox, where we had already 7 months of fundraising, pivoted the company and the technology 2 times, had like a lot of issues with the customers, and then wanted to do something very different from what we planned we wanted to do. Um, like runway got very, 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 very short, and I was the CEO, and I was going in the office, and then I looked at all the people because we already had like 20 people, and I felt like I had this chain around my neck with a stone that weighs a ton, because I was like looking at the people and I wasn't sure, can we pay them end of next month? Because we were really on the edge. And then I also at the time we had kind of personal liabilities of the office on privately, and then also a loan that we took to invest in a company as founders. And so I I mean, for me, I wasn't able to communicate anymore to the company because I was feeling so anxious about everything, about, like I even about, will somebody figure out that we don't have much runway? And so, before I jump in how I handled it later, I would just like to know, did you ever had such a situation where you were like, felt completely alone, lost in that thing because you didn't know how to communicate to your team?
I mean, like, definitely, probably like several times. And especially when you're talking about this like crazy feeling of pressure, and anxiety and maybe also fear. And and then that you're the person who kind of like supposed to carry the responsibility around that, and also the conscious, so to say, like knowledge of that. It's crazy. It's a crazy pressure, and that's definitely probably pressure. I always say, like being pregnant or having had someone dying in your close cycle. Like you can't, let's say, tell someone how that feels when you haven't experienced it. So, I know it. I would say I probably had it in every company at least once. So I do also think it's a bit of a natural feeling. I don't believe in these dream stories. I think stories always sound good at the end, right? And also because we are humans, so we only remember the end. It's like with relationships, you only remember how it ended, not how it started then anymore. However, yeah, it's something you have to have experienced, and I think it's also part of being an entrepreneur and entrepreneurship as such. And I do think the most interesting stories actually are born from crazy ups and downs. If it's too straight, too easy, it's either not true or probably not that exciting. Uh, Especially because I do think that, I mean, entrepreneurship is risk taking. It's basically like operating out of everyone's comfort zone, out of technical comfort zone, out of any, like, say, so to say, known standard. So you're constantly breaking the standards, and if you're breaking things, then yeah, it's tough, right? And then you end up in these situations. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Long
So
answer.
yeah, I thank you very much for sharing. Now it's just, I think it's super interesting for everybody who is running a company to first of all hear that you're not alone and how that feels and that everybody goes through this. But I think also the other aspect and the other component is how do you handle that? And I want to share another story when I was after my burnout and DRC returned to Connex in my second short journey as the interim CEO. I actually tried a different approach, which is probably a little bit you need a certain company culture to that can hold that energy. But what I tried to do is I was trying to come with a from a place of pure transparency. So the board has just at that point had just released former CEO, and I was more or less overnight jumping in as the CEO again. And I mean, we were in a very difficult financial situation back at that time. And then it was, and we weren't fully, like the company and I weren't fully aware of that. But after a week, we were. And then I was remembering my situation from Series A, where I was like, oh, God, not again. And back at the time, then I tried something differently. So basically, I played full transparency and said, hey, look, everybody, it's really unfortunate news, but this is the reality of the company. And then open up the financials and said we're in which situations we are um, to everybody. And that also had a consequence to, like, it led to a bigger turnaround, which meant nearly like, which meant to a bigger layoff that affected, unfortunately, also as it's always does, that most of the times the people who carry most of the responsibility are not there anymore. So it hits the people that actually gave a lot, and so but they had compassion and they had understanding because I was very like open and said, hey, look, this is the situation. The situation is either the company does won't exist or we have to have that hard decision and it impacts a lot of people. And I think from my perspective, I mean, this is not trying to be coming from me personally, it felt much lighter, but I also had the feeling because it felt lighter for me. I communicated very like transparent, open, and it was a very quick thing. And people were also understand, even the people that were really hardly infected, they for them they had understanding. And so I think there is this, and this, I mean, we're talking about a certain size of a company already at that point, differently probably than in the beginning. But I think it is that there is a balance between you need to carry it all alone versus you can share it. And I think for me, reflecting on it, I would have done way better if I would have communicated and at least shared it in a smaller group, more transparent during my Series A process, and not trying to carry the burden that I couldn't even handle.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a very interesting point because I think it's on the one side, the question basically, how do you handle the facts, so to say, of that situation? Basically meaning like, how much do you share and how much not? Um, and with who as well. So there's a lot of, let's say, in content questions around that, but then there's also you as a person. And I think it's not only like where you standing, but also how are you emotional? Let's say, how your own feelings and how is your own perception of a situation. And I must say, so I would say I would separate these topics a little bit because I don't think that there's the perfect answer for both to find generalistically, so to say, because I think it also depends a lot like where you're standing. So meaning that I do think that like, or let's say I was in situations where I was super driven by fear and anxiety, and that was definitely not healthy for me. And probably I was also not like the best leader. So I mean, someone who would have been probably less anxious and fear driven would have made maybe a better job. So let's say let's take that in consideration. However, I do believe that in my situation, if I would have been then even transparent with what I saw or knew, I maybe the let's say the reaction from others would have been overwhelming for me, and I could have not handled that honesty. You know what I mean? And I do feel that, so to say, shielding myself and protecting maybe myself also emotionally and psychology. I mean, from the psychology standpoint, it was maybe the right thing to do because I just wouldn't have known how to handle it. And I do even think that these people who would have, let's say, if I would have told them the honest situation, they would have maybe expected from me to stay strong and stay calm, and maybe I wouldn't have managed to do that. So I feel maybe I was also not in the right like time of my life to be in the power zone to handle that honesty. And of course now I'm always the person. I mean, you know that I'm maybe sometimes even too honest, right? So I can stand. I mean, I just had a very honest discussion with the founder. It was tough. It was really, really tough because I really wanted to invest into the company. I promised actually the founder that I will bring him to IC. And then actually he's giving me some honest information about the company. And then I said, okay, then now it's over. I just can't invest in you anymore. And I mean, he was shocked and I was kind of like shocked, but I was so okay with, let's say, saying that so honest because I knew it's the right thing for him and the right thing for me, but I can also stand that moment of stress and I can stand that moment of disagreement. And I can stand it in a so confident way that I know I gave the, let's say, emotionally the right message to that person. So I mean, like, when we're thinking about how much to share or not, it's also the question of like the way, the perspective you have in that moment of time, right?
Hmm.
That's at least my feeling about it.
No, I think that's very. Mm, I think you're completely right because it depends. I think now when I'm reflecting on it, it's really about what can you sell, how much honesty can you have with yourself, and I think probably for me, if others would have also, like, I try to neglect the reality, which protected me to be able to fundraise properly during the series. And I think that's the other part of the truth, right? Because you're in this, as we said last time, you're in this kind of schizophrenic state of the shining bright future that everybody wants to be an investor, that you need to hold, and the reality of the amount of money that's going down, down, down
And
every
the
month.
question marks you still have, right?
Yes, yeah, that's the uncertainty and managing that uncertainty. And then I think, as you said, right, what do you give to the team? And because the team also needs to ship, they need to deliver, they need to sell, they need to believe. How much can you share that takes away to not take away the belief, right? Because I think ultimately, as a founder, if you stop believing, then you're screwed. Because if you don't believe in it, nobody else will believe in it.
Exactly. And if you don't believe in that moment and you would communicate, or people sensing, and I think usually you don't even have to communicate, right? We are all animals in the end of the day. So we smell the other person. So words don't even carry it. And if you don't shield that maybe in the right moment and you're not able to kind of like make yourself smell good, then you have a problem. And also this, I think what you said, it's very correct in terms of like attention span. I do believe we all have only, like as humans, a certain amount of attention we can give and have. And I just had also discussion with an amazing founder. They're having a great company and they're almost at 10 million ARR right now. And he was talking with me about R&D. And we actually concluded that R&D, I think, is still a founder led function. You probably have to test a lot and make a lot of mistakes outside, so to say, of the functioning big ship you have built, and maybe not even inform anyone about that. Because otherwise, let's say, people always look at what the CEO is doing. And if I'm working in, I don't know, just fixing the new feature, which actually is supposed to bring us the next revenue gap, but then I hear, oh, our founder is already working on something new, and actually the big new feature will be XYZ. Why should I be still super motivated, to kind of like finish my stuff in a sense? Because your so to say attention is already consumed by our natural hope as humans that it will always be better the next thing. So we concluded, it's probably the best, or let's say my experience is definitely the best, to keep teams very separated from the information flow. And especially, for example, when you're shipping new features, to try and error in a very protected, safe space, so that the rest of the team can really focus on what is the money machine today, make that better, and really ensure that you are able to do that innovation by, let's say, bringing the revenues in. And if they would think, oh, there's something new coming, then they probably think like, okay, why should I work still on old stuff? Or why can't I just rely that my CEO, who has fixed it the last few times, will come around with a new idea, and that's gonna save us all. So yeah, I do think it's really always dependent on the situation.
But I think all in all, it depends also on the way you lead and the culture you build, right? And if you have us, like, how close, how much of are your co-founders your real partners, or SSU, or is it are they like, can they handle this? Are they real co-founders, or they are roles in the company, right? And I think for me, it's always like a founder have to or has to has a certain, like, additional resilience, additional needs to be able to carry because something special additionally. I don't care if it's the CTO, CPO, PSO, CEO, but this is like it's different, right? Somehow, at least subconsciously, I feel that there's a higher expectation because they are the carrier of that vision, and if they are really kind of co-founders or with each other as and true partners, they all are to a certain degree responsible to hold that vision, to hold that culture. And I think with them, like it's a good test as a founding CEO to test, can they handle that? If they don't handle that, it's like then it might be time to rethink certain things.
I totally agree. I mean, I totally agree. And I think that's also like a golden rule for any relationship. If you can't, so to say, be honest, and also like if you can't be yourself, and if you can't share what you're experiencing as well, then you're anyway losing connection, right? I mean, I think it's between co-founders, it's in your personal relationship with your friends, with your partner, with your kids, actually. I do feel that, I mean, a lot of people believe that they shouldn't like be honest with their kids. And I must say, I'm trying to radically be honest with my kids, because in the end of the day, why should they think of me as someone cooler or even more stupid than I am, right? So I rather try to, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't overshare things which are not, so to say, good in terms of age, or appropriate in terms of age. But I do think that like as much honesty as possible is really helpful for anyone, and I mean especially also for my kids, to not think that you're someone else than you are. And in that sense of building this connection, you will discover that people are also sharing more, of course, from their life, and the connection becomes stronger. And you actually also, I would say, have built better connections, because people really see you how you are. And that's of course, as a founder, in the same way. So the stronger, I would say, the more honest, or the more you are yourself, the stronger will be the connection to the outside.
Listen, wise lesson. No, I think just I 100% agree. The It is always and I think ultimately what you said also gave me the reflection of, okay, how much time do you want to, like, how much, like, when is it time to really kind of sit down and digest, right? And how much of that emotion is something that is just in yourself, right? Because I think we know fundraising is hard and everything, but then no means just basically this is not the right time, and this is a business model. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your belief. It has nothing to do how valuable it's just important, like to I think distinguish also that, and that you're realistic. And I think also, I think the other side of the coin that is just important to mention is that with VCs, it is a little bit like founder and VC relationships are kind of strange, because you're playing that dating game, and the less, like, the more, as a VC or as an investor, I had to feel the more you're chased by a founder, the less interesting you'll get, and the more others chase that founder, the more interested you get, right? It's like somehow it's a kind of a little bit of an it saying completely honest and completely transparent relation. It is usually just after the investment, at least before that. It's a game, but this is like a dating game. I don't know how you see that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I do think that um, it was a little bit like that for a while, because um, maybe, let's say, VC started in, like, I mean, like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, really, in Europe. And then in the beginning, it was basically a VC market, meaning that VCs could, let's say, pick and choose their founders, right? So basically the returns you could generate were really, really good. Then I think the whole competition game kind of like started. And then suddenly it was a little bit driven by this like demand and supply market. I do think that today, at least, if you as a VC really want to do good returns, you really need to find the companies who are maybe not obvious, who are really like, so to say, outliers in one or the other direction, and really specialize in certain areas, because the competition on these like no-brainers is anyway so high that I would say, at least me personally, I'm not that interested in the companies usually if the competition is already so high. And funny enough, I also do see that this competition is actually has a very high negative influence on many founders. And I mean, that's a bold statement, because I don't want to, let's say, put anyone in any box. I'm really not the person like that. But I do see that founders who have the opportunity to fundraise very easily, that they end up raising at a very high valuation, and that this is often a huge problem for these founders to reach these valuations. And I would say not because the founders or the companies are not good, but basically because the expectations are so high that it's actually really hard to really achieve them, and maybe even, I mean, like, not fair in a sense, right? And then plus the expectations don't only get high from investors towards the founder and to the company, but also the employees think like, wow, we're sitting now suddenly on 20 million on such a high valuation. Hey, come on, I want to have more bonus. I want to have more salary. And actually, I
More
worked
barriers in the
so hard. Exactly. I worked so hard. Actually, I can have my free beer here now. It's Friday evening. I worked for the last 3 years, 24/7, and now we made it. And unfortunately, you know, after the fundraisers before the next one, so it never stops. But how do you tell that 100 people if you just fundraise 25 million, yeah, on a super high valuation?
Yeah,
So I
or
would
much more.
say exactly. So yeah, I mean, even like 30 or 50 or something. So to be honest, it's a freaking hard job from a founder to keep that high performance culture up, to be somehow honest with the success of fundraising then, and still kind of like keep everyone in the mood like, oh, we are dying tomorrow if you don't give 200%. But the dying tomorrow and giving 200% is unfortunately what makes most companies successful. So, I mean, it's, so to say, this competition, I would say, is also bringing people into tough spots. So I would say, if I'm seeing, like, for me, the one and only main thing is if I have a smart person in front of me. And if I have a smart person in front of me, I don't care who's seen that or not. And it's I mean, funny, of course, obviously we VCs, sorry for the long thing, but just one funny story. I just shared with another VC a case, and he got back to me and said like, yeah, we will forward it to the team. It's not his area. And then he did it. And then I actually said, it's really sad because I really wanted to work with a smart person on that deal. So bad that you give it to your team. And then he said like, yeah, but the other one is also good, blah, blah, blah. So whatever comes back is, yeah, we're not interested for an intro. And then I said, why? And then he said, I don't know, but I mean, your blurb you gave us was not especially positive about the company. And then I said, yeah, because I really wanted that you think out yourself if you think this is an interesting area or not. Like, I'm not giving you like if this is like ultra hot for me or not. You have to actually figure this out yourself. But it was like really funny because, let's say, he wanted for me to have the judgment about it. I'm like, no, I'm not working with guys like this. It's out for me. Like, so I think it's really, I mean, good VCs, I think, making up their mind alone. And I see a lot of good ones.
Yeah, I think there's good VCs. I mean, my experience in the US, I mean, the real tier one VCs, they don't care if somebody else is interested. They don't care what, if you have another, if they had if, like, just an example, having a term sheet at a certain valuation is not like they do their own term sheet on their terms. and either the fund, especially one VC fund that I work with very closely, they are known to do lower valuations on they're very fair and kind to the founders in many ways, and they're known for that. And so they play their game, and they play it very well. And I think this is but this is, I think, still not. And I mean, you're also a founder. You went through this, and like also a certain experience there. I think it's not normal, because there's still this thing. If a tier one of the world leaders wants to is on the deal, you want to have the deal, and there is this still I mean, there is a competition. Otherwise, it's a competitive market, I would say. So um, I think it's still very interesting. But what you said is true. I mean, handling, and this is another point of resilience, right? How, if you raise a lot of money, right? How do you keep people motivated? Because money is no sustainable motivation. We all know that, right? Everybody who got a salary raising thought, yeah, now I'm like amazing. Guess what? 6 months later, it's completely forgotten. It's I think it's hard to, when you have a lot of money, to still keep the motivation. And we see money, um, and raising money is beautiful, but it's not winning. Winning is customers. Winning is something else, right? Winning is customer value. Winning is EBIT. Winning is all the things that most startups don't have, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's also, for example, very interesting to be honest with yourself, your investors, and your team, what really winning means for you. Because I also do see that many people have very different definitions of what is success. And I do think, I mean, like making it clear for you that the success definition is really coming from you, and the more honest and the more transparent you are with that success definition, you probably will achieve it, more likely, right? So that, I feel, it's often a misjudgment that, so to say, success definitions are copied from other people. And I do feel that investors, but also like employees, I feel when you're really honest about like what is your definition of success, that can also be a super motivator if you suddenly realize, wow, we're sharing the same understanding, we're sharing the same vision, and we're really having a common ground of what we're doing here. That's important to feel super strong. I think, and that's also a life formula, because that's also something for your relationships, for even for achieving health and living long. So yeah, that's a life a lesson for sure.
Well, that's very true. I think that's the and this is also interestingly what I feel currently in the market. You felt a shift from 3 years ago. There was like, how much money did you raise? And there was everywhere in all social media channels was 50 million raised, 70 million raised, 400 million raised, and and at that valuation, and nowadays I feel somehow it shifted to ARR, or it shifted to revenue, which is, I think, definitely the better metrics. Ultimately, what I very personally, but I love to see is more of that impact, even though revenue has a certain relation to that, right? If somebody pays for you, they perceive the value, that is great. But I think on terms of what some companies could even tell a bigger story in terms of what impact they create for their customers, for the world. At Congress, where I was always in the North Stars, how many trains are now on time because of us? How many people have we helped getting lifetime back, right? And so how many people are in each train and stuff. And it's like, And then for the customer, it was for sure important how many like delay minutes, but ultimately for the world and society is like only if trains are functional, people will use them because they believe they are reliable. They will be at home at time for their families and for their and to do the work they want to do in their life. And so I think it's interesting how I see a positive shift, because back at time was just fundraising. Nobody knew what companies were doing. Just raise 50 million, raise 25 million. And if people said a name, there's like people said, oh yeah, this company, yeah, I heard they raised so much money, but nobody knew what they're doing.
Yeah, that's actually reminding me of an interesting thing I heard a few days ago. As you know, I'm having a little bit of a hobby project, and we working there on a beautiful app for your mind. And so I talked to a very nice woman, and she's doing something similar in the space. And I asked her, like, what does people want to achieve with your app, and what's the dream of people today? And then she said, yeah, it's really, interesting topic, because in Europe, everyone wants to relieve stress, which says a lot about Europe, unfortunately. And in Silicon Valley, everyone is looking for consciousness. And I was like, wow, that's interesting, right? If consciousness, which I just read beautifully, is the connectedness to all things, is your goal, then you basically have to seek a certain balance in your life. And you also have to be, in a certain way, honest with yourself, because otherwise you can't be connected to your life, or you're not honestly connected, you know? So basically you need to really get that balance there. You need to have the connection to the true real things which are important to you. And it's actually quite impressive and somehow beautiful, and actually gave me a lot of hope to think, like, wow, if that's what people, so to say, hopefully in the front row of innovation are looking for, and especially in, of course, today's times of AI, consciousness is such a topic in every way. But at least that's a little spark of hope, because I think it's maybe a good success definition to achieve consciousness.
I love that. I think this is the perfect end of this beautiful episode. Thank you very much, Valerie.
Thanks for listening and for being part of this conversation. Before you go, we have got a quick preview of our next episode. I hope you're gonna enjoy it. Take a listen.
You need to remind yourself that you don't know anything. I think that's kind of what I try to do.
I bootstrapped my first companies, and I love that, because when you bootstrap, and if you know that you don't, let's say, rely on investors giving you money, then obviously your complete thought of, like, every penny you invest, you need to have a return on investment of that single penny. Those who are actually, while they're, so to say, fighting, they're enjoying the fight, that those are so much more successful than the others, and that this might be like the main difference between, so to say, the very best or the winners to the losers.